On the afternoon of Camilla's 79th birthday, the cameras were pointed at the wrong person. Every lens, every royal correspondent, every front page was trained on the Queen as she stepped out at Highgrove for a quiet family gathering on July the 17th.
On the afternoon of Camilla's 79th birthday, every camera in Britain was pointed at the wrong person. Every lens, every royal correspondent, every front page was focused on the Queen as she arrived at Highgrove for a quiet family gathering. And while the country watched the woman of the hour, almost nobody noticed the 11-year-old standing slightly apart near the garden steps. Princess Charlotte had brought something with her. A small posy of pale blue flowers tied with a plain ribbon held carefully in both hands the way a child holds something they have been told matters. They were forget-me-nots, Diana's flower. And when Charlotte stepped forward and placed them, not on the birthday table, but at the base of the memorial roses her grandfather keeps at Highgrove, the mood in that garden shifted in a way that no one had planned for, and no one quite knew how to describe afterward. This is that story, and it is not simply a sweet moment from a family birthday. It may be the clearest signal yet of who the next generation of this monarchy has quietly decided to become. The child everyone overlooked. For 9 years, the public has watched Prince George as the future king and treated his younger sister as the charming afterthought. The girl who waves beautifully, behaves at weddings, and disappears back into the frame. That reading was a mistake. What happened at Highgrove on July 17th suggests that the child everyone filed away as decorative may be the one quietly carrying the most complex inheritance in the family. The memory of a grandmother she never met, honored at a celebration for the woman whose name was once set against Diana's in the public imagination for decades. The stakes reach past one birthday. They touch how this family holds its own history, and whether the wound that has defined the House of Windsor for a generation can ever fully close. Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana was born on May 2, 2015. That third name was not chosen casually. It was a decision made by a son who wanted his mother's name inside his daughter from the very first day of her life. That detail sat quietly in the public record for years, mentioned and then forgotten, until moments like this one make it feel deliberate again. Charlotte has grown up almost entirely in public, and yet she remains, by design, the least understood of the three Wales children. George carries the weight of succession. Louis carries the role of the family's comic relief at every public outing. Charlotte carries something harder to name. And until recently, the palace seemed content to let her remain in soft focus. That was a significant underestimation. Why the flowers matter. To understand why a handful of flowers could change the atmosphere of a private garden full of adults, you need to understand what forget-me-nots mean to this family. They were Diana's favorite flower. After her death, they were planted in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace for the memorial marking what would have been her 60th birthday. They appeared quietly at Harry's wedding in 2018. To place forget-me-nots anywhere near a royal occasion is not a neutral act. Everyone old enough to remember 1997 understands the signal, even when the person carrying them is a child who did not live through that year. Highgrove itself adds another layer to the story. It is King Charles's private home, the garden he has built and tended by hand over 4 decades. It holds a small memorial planting that the family has never made a public spectacle of. This is not a state palace or a ceremonial venue. It is as close to a private family space as the royal family gets, which makes what Charlotte did there all the more striking, the moment nobody staged. The first thing royal watchers noticed when the IMAGs emerged was that the gesture did not appear to be planned. According to reporting in Hello magazine, the family's arrangements for the day had been kept deliberately small, a private lunch rather than a public appearance. There were no official photographers positioned to capture a set-piece moment. The images that eventually reached the public came from a single long lens positioned beyond the garden wall. Whatever Charlotte did, she was not doing it for a camera she could see. That detail is precisely what gave the moment its weight. It read as sincere because, as far as the child knew, no one important was watching. There was no audience to perform for. There was only a birthday, a garden, and a decision she had apparently made herself. Sources close to the household, speaking to the Daily Mail, said Charlotte had asked to bring the flowers herself. The choice of forget-me-nots by these accounts came from the girl, not from an adult managing the occasion or choreographing a symbolic moment. The account that has circulated since is consistent. An 11-year-old connected her grandmother's name, which she carries as her own, to her grandmother's flower, which she had somehow learned to recognize and love, and decided on her own that a birthday was a fitting day to honor both women at once. Not the calculation of a strategist. The instinct of a child who has been paying closer attention than anyone realized. What William has been doing quietly. Behind that instinct is years of deliberate private work. Those who follow the family closely believe Prince William has been unusually intentional about how his children come to know their grandmother. He does not, by most accounts, keep Diana as a distant legend reserved for anniversaries and formal occasions. He keeps her present and ordinary, her favorite songs, her sense of humor, the flowers she loved, folded into everyday life rather than preserved behind glass. Royal Bye. Biographer Ingrid Seward has written that William has always been determined his children would know Diana as a person, not just as an icon, that the grief would be carried warmly rather than solemnly, that her memory would feel like presence rather than absence. If that is true, and the evidence from Highgrove suggests it is, then what Charlotte did in that garden was less a surprise and more a first public glimpse of a lesson that had been years in the making. Royal watchers have long noted that of the three children, Charlotte is said to resemble Diana most. Not simply in appearance, but in temperament, in the particular way she reads a room and responds to what she finds there. William watching his daughter from a few feet away and choosing not to intervene, not to redirect the moment or smooth it over, letting Diana's name sit in the garden on her favorite flower in his daughter's hands on the birthday of the woman who came after, suggests he recognized exactly what was happening and trusted it, the impossible space between two women. To feel the full weight of what Charlotte did, you need to hold two people in the picture at once. On one side, a woman turning 79 who has spent most of her adult life being measured against a beloved memory. Camilla has carried that comparison for decades, not with dramatic protests or public defensiveness, but with patient, quiet duty. Royal biographer Ingrid Seward has written that Camilla long ago made peace with the reality that she would always be measured against Diana's memory. That acceptance, maintained across decades of public scrutiny, represents its own form of extraordinary endurance. On the other side, a child of 11 who never met Diana, who knows her grandmother only through a name she carries, a few photographs, a flower she has learned to recognize, and the careful way the adults around her lower their voice, as when they speak of her. Between them, a handful of blue flowers, and the most delicate question this family has carried for nearly 30 years. What happened next is what makes this story remarkable. Camilla did not look past the gesture. She did not redirect the moment or receive it with the kind of polished neutrality that royal protocol sometimes demands. A palace insider quoted by OK Magazine described her reaction as gracious and visibly moved, saying the Queen understood immediately what the child was doing and did not flinch from it. If that account is accurate, then Camilla met Charlotte exactly where the child was. She allowed herself to be moved by a gesture that pointed, however gently, at the very comparison she has spent years trying to move beyond. That is not a small thing. It is, in its own quiet way, a form of extraordinary grace. What royal commentators are saying. The moment did not go unanalyzed. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams observed that the true significance lay not just in the flowers themselves, but in the timing, and in the fact that Charlotte had found a way to honor Diana at Camilla's celebration without asking anyone in that garden to choose between them, without creating tension, without disrupting the day. The adults in this family have struggled to achieve that publicly for a generation. The Diana versus Camilla narrative was constructed by the press and sustained by the public for decades. It became so embedded that simply appearing in the same frame as both women's memories required careful management by royal communications teams. An 11-year-old walked into that space and made it look almost simple, not through strategy, not through carefully worded statements, through a child's instinct to honor the people she loves without deciding that honoring one means diminishing the other. That instinct, that particular emotional intelligence, is something this family has never quite managed to model cleanly in public. And the fact that it arrived from the member of Tihad, he family, everyone had spent years overlooking, is perhaps the most significant detail of all. What this reveals about Charlotte's future. It would be unfair to load a single afternoon with more weight than an 11-year-old should have to carry. Charlotte is still a schoolgirl, years away from any formal royal role, and this moment belongs to her childhood rather than her public future. But what Highgrove revealed is something worth paying attention to. The emotional center of this monarchy may be quietly shifting to a place where no one was watching. The composure Charlotte has always shown in public, the curtsy that was always correct, the wave that always landed on cue, was never simply good behavior. It was, it now seems, the visible surface of something considerably deeper. A child who carries her grandmother's name, chose her grandmother's flower, and placed it, on her own, at the right moment in the right place, in a way that caused no disruption and left no one needing to explain anything afterward. The reconciliation the adults in this family could never quite complete in public. The closing of the space between Diana and Camilla, between the first marriage and the second, between the memory the country built and the woman who actually lived, may one day be finished by the children who inherited the wound without inheriting the grievance. They did not live through 1997. They do not carry the specific weight of that year's grief and anger and public mourning. What they carry instead is a name, a flower, and apparently a understanding of both women that allows them to hold Diana and Camilla in the same frame at the same time. A grandmother's name, a grandmother's flower, a birthday that will now be remembered for something no one came to see. The cameras were pointed at the wrong person that afternoon. The moment that will matter longest came from the 11-year-old standing slightly apart near the garden steps, holding something carefully in both hands. And when she stepped forward and placed it where she placed it, the mood in that garden changed. Nobody had planned for that. Nobody needed to. If this story moved you, drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Charlotte's gesture says about how this generation of royals is growing up? And what does it tell us about how this family is beginning to heal? Subscribe and hit the bell for more deep dives into the real stories shaping the British monarchy. Thank you for watching.